Welcome to the channel, friends. So today's video is going to be a Corvette related video, and it's going to be an update video and kind of an overview video of the new Edelbrock heat exchanger that I chose for my car for the LS9 build. This heat exchanger is twice the capacity of the stock ZR1 intercooler heat exchanger. So my plan for today is to install this and fit it to the shroud. That's going to take some work. It's not a perfect fit. There's going to be some cutting and fitting involved. So I want to go ahead and take care of that today, but I also want to cover all the new stuff I've put on the car and all the updates on the build. So let's go off to the garage here and I'll show you what I've done so far. So as you can see, more parts are being put onto the LS9. I went ahead and took care of the push rods and rocker arms, and those are installed, and I have the valve covers installed. Those are the ones I custom painted and custom made all the bolts for. As you can see, I went ahead and started putting on stuff. I went ahead and took care of the K-Tech high pressure, high scavenge oil pump, which you cannot see. Put back the timing cover. And then I started installing some of the components here, like the water pump, the pulleys, getting everything back in place, as well as taking care of the ATI super damper with the ARP bolt. So that's all in place now. That was kind of a big project. You know, that's an overdrive pulley in the bottom there, so it's a lower 14% overdrive, along with the upper pulley, which is a 2.35 on the snout. So that there is quite the combination, and will provide some great power. So moving along, after I got the super damper in, I went ahead and took care of blowing out the AC condenser. This thing was full of little tiny rocks and pebbles and like pieces of sand. That took a while. I had to go there with a pick and tweezers and kind of poke everything through. That there will affect your airflow. So if this thing is blocked up with sand, you know, it's going to end up blocking airflow to the radiator and to the heat exchanger and all that airflow going through to the engine and stuff. So I took care of that when everything was kind of back on and taped off, because I didn't want any of that sand to go into the motor somehow. So after I took care of the AC condenser, then I went ahead and put back the steering rack, which is kind of a pain in the ass. Okay, it's a really tight fit in there. As you can see, it's like right up against the lower pulley, but I went ahead, put that back in there, put the steering shaft back on, went ahead and also installed the ABS modulator pump here, took care of that. That's all back in place, and the motor is starting to look more like a motor now. Parts are being put onto it, and I'm getting less parts that are on my workbench. So I'm really happy that things are cleaning up and making room in the workshop. It was quite annoying for a while having all these parts scattered around the garage and workshop, and it just feels like nothing's being done. So, but moving along, I think the next step is going to be taking care of the routing for the heat exchanger. So that's why I want to take care of that shroud with the heat exchanger put into it. I want to lay that out. That way I can lay that out, put it in place, know exactly how it's going to fit. And then install the radiator, obviously, and that cover. And then after that, I will go ahead and port out the supercharger. Actually, before I port it out, I want to do a dry fit with the actual supercharger snout, the Kong snout that I got, and the new carbon intake from Kong Performance. So everything takes time because I am just one person doing this. That's the way I want it. I prefer to build it myself. That way I know exactly what is going on with the build and the motor and how everything is done precisely to my standards. So, you know, the heat exchanger has to be done first because it's important to get all this stuff done in the front here and kind of have an idea of how I want to route the lines. So with that being said, the heat exchanger is an Edelbrock, and this is the part number right here. So this is going to be a tight fit in here, but it should work out just fine. I want to make sure that it does not rub on the AC condenser, which you see right here. This is the scuff marks from the AC condenser, which means I have to put the heat exchanger below this scuff mark somehow so it doesn't rub. I'm gonna have to install like foam insulation on either side of this or the inside edge here. That way it keeps the AC condenser up away from the new $700+ Edelbrock heat exchanger. Okay, so let's move on and show you what else is going on here. I have here the Kong modification service for the factory LS9 snout. Now, I want to make a separate video in this because this is not the first snout I had. Okay, the first snout I had to actually send back to Kong because it was not acceptable. But he sent me out another one, and I'm happy that I have it, but at the same time I'm a little disappointed. But I will go ahead and still run it, and I will talk about it in another video. I really don't want to get into it right now because there's a lot of details, and I want to kind of document this in a video because no one covers this component on the LS9. No one. I mean, it's a great product, but it has its downfalls, I think. But it can be fixed, and it can be improved. So, I'm going to actually open this up to 112. Right now it's about 108, 109, and it's ginormous on the inside. That's one great thing about the Kong snout. So, that is a service Kong kind of, offers, where you send in your OEM snout, as you can see here, and then this part gets chopped off, and he like welds on and fits up a flange, which is much larger than stock. And it comes with the LPE hub as well. But I want to make a separate video on that because I think there's a lot of information that I want to talk about in my experience with this process, buying this part here, which is not cheap, okay? It's a $2,000 plus part and service. But I'm going to save that for another video. Moving along, I have here the Kong dual pass lid. And this thing looks freaking phenomenal. I am telling you, it is just, when you see this thing in person, it just looks so cool. But most importantly, it's a functional part. Let's go ahead and lift this up so I can show you what's going on here. And it's one giant intercooler brick. Look at that. It's ginormous. Okay, it has 3/4 inlets here. I'm going to replace them with this, which is a LSX concept inlet. So that will bolt off, and then I'll bolt this on. So I prefer to have the AN12 fittings on the inlets versus the barb fittings. It just allows for flexibility and the ability to basically unscrew and remove the lid without having to undo all sorts of hoses and stuff. So that is the Kong lid. Very happy with this. I have no complaints so far. It's a great looking product. And it looks like the LT style lid, if you ask me. I think that's what it's designed after. But obviously it's made for an LS9, and it's probably the best cooling mod you can do when you up your power. You have to have an additional reinforced intercooler brick when you're doing like anything past stock pressures. Even the stock ones blow up, which is not good. So that's going to be a great performing, piece of the intercooler system, along with that Edelbrock heat exchanger, which is just massive. I mean, it's twice as big as the factory one. So really happy with those components so far. And what else do I have going on here? I have the Kong carbon fiber intake, the 5-inch intake. I will go ahead in the future and do a Mighty Mouse catch can setup video, how I run it. And I also use the Elite Engineering clean air separator. So I'll go over that in a separate video. I don't want to get into it. Here is the stock alternator. I'm actually replacing this with a DC Power 270 amp alternator, which is being custom made right now. So I should be getting it within the next week or two. It's a pretty pricey alternator. I want to make sure I have enough juice when it comes to supplying electricity for all the pumps. I plan on doing a 4 dual pump setup, so that's a 40 amp fuel system, along with possibly down the road a Pro Speed dual speed fan, which is also more amperage. And I want to run dual intercooler pumps on my new intercooler setup, so that's going to require more amperage and power needed from the electrical system. So I upgraded the alternator. I think it's a good idea to do that if you do a lot of additional supporting components that are going to draw a lot from the battery. Otherwise, you're just not going to have sufficient power to run all these pumps that you add on. So every person's needs are different. So I stepped up and ordered that DC power billet. It's going to be all black. So billet front, billet rear, and billet black pulley, all anodized. So with that being said, every build is going to be different. Your needs are going to be different. To do it right, it's going to cost a lot of money. I don't care what people say. You can kind of do it, for a budget, this and that. You're going to sacrifice performance and reliability when you try to do it on the cheaper side. So you want to make sure you have good supporting components for everything else on the build. There's so many things to think about when it comes to building a serious horsepower motor. You got to take one thing at a time and kind of make sure that section or those components are going to work well and provide adequate support to the others. But like I said, my first priority right now is to take care of the intercooler system and get this heat exchanger fitted up, and then I will go ahead and remove the front bumper and figure out how I want to run the lines. So I want to set up the lines on the intercooler so they're symmetrical on the engine bay. So what I mean is, when they come out of the bricks, out of the inlets, I want 2 hoses coming here and 2 hoses coming this way. So that configuration is going to require a certain setup, and I plan on running a pump on either side because I want to make sure I have good flow, but I don't want to have too much pressure. Very important. A lot of pumps out there, one being like the EMP Stewart pump, which is reprogrammed for higher RPM, is not a great option, I think, because it provides way too much pressure on the lines, and I'm afraid I'm just going to puncture and blow up a brick or blow up the heat exchanger. So I want to make sure I have pretty decent pressure, but not too much, but have high flow at the same time. So I'm going to achieve that by using 3/4 inch lines, AN 12 fittings everywhere, which means I have to weld on AN 12 fittings on the factory tank and possibly also the heat exchanger. So that's going to have to be TIG welded on. And then I want to link up 2 pumps for the intercooler. So I'm going to have 1 pump here and 1 pump here behind the fog light. So that's going to aid in the actual improved flow, but not over pressurize the system, in my opinion. A lot of people have different configurations. They use the EMP pump, and I guess they have good results. But in my opinion, the EMP pump, especially when it's reprogrammed, is way too much pressure. It's like almost 40 psi of pressure with some restriction in the system. So heat exchanger and intercooler bricks. 30-40 psi is way too high of a pressure to be running in your intercooler cooling system. It's just crazy. So if you get the regular EMP pump that's not reprogrammed, that flows the same, according to Lingenfelter, as a factory ZR1 pump, believe it or not. Exactly the same. They did testing. If you can look online, you can find the article where they show a chart, and the non-reprogrammed Stewart pump is the same exact flow as the OEM ZR1 pump. So with that being said, I mean, I'll take that with a little by little and chew on that, get everything fitted, and figure out how I'm going to do the intercooler system, because that is the next step. But also, let's see what else is new in the car. Oh, the wheels. So I went ahead and powder coated the wheels. These are the factory wheels. They were a competition gray or titanium gray. I don't know what you want to call them, but it's the gray color. And I powder coated them satin black. It's actually called Blackboard, and I believe the company is called Prismatic that makes the powder for the powder coating. So they have a 0 to 6% gloss in them. So they pretty much look like a satin black, but the actual proper name is Blackboard. So they look phenomenal. With the gray calipers, they just look absolutely sick. I'm running Michelin Sport Cup 2s on this, non-run flat. And also I went down a size, so 265 in the front and 325 in the rear. Actually down 2 sizes in the front. 285 is stock. But I wanted to have that nice stretch on the tire, as you can see there. I want to get that nice stretch inward. I just think it looks better. Also in the rear are 15 millimeter spacers. Okay, and I have ARP extended bolts on this car, front and rear. So very important when you're doing spacers, you want the extended wheel studs. The fronts are 10 millimeter for spacing. If you go 15 on this, it's going to start rubbing on the inside corner here, and it's not going to be good. So 10 millimeters good for the front, 15 in the rear, and that covers the wheels really. I've been dying to do this for the car, and I really like the way it came out. Satin black is really good looking color. So as you can tell, I'm going with like kind of a contrast look. I got the black wheels, black features on the car, and I got the white paint job. But I think the wheels came out great, and they look absolutely phenomenal. They look much better than the gray wheels I had on here. Mainly because I started changing stuff on the car, like I put these APR carbon mirrors and the carbon rear spoiler, and it started looking like it had too many pieces of of black on it, black features, kind of feature heavy, and it just started looking odd with the gray wheels. So now it looks right. I have the proper kind of looking set of wheels on it that matches the rest of the scheme going on in the car, and I'm extremely happy with the way it looks. Also, let's see what's on the car. Maybe you guys might not know of. I have the Morimoto LED fog lights. These here have great performance when it comes to lighting, and I'm really happy with the way they look. And I think they make the car look more modern. So really happy with that. I didn't do a video on that because I just ended up installing them last year on a whim. But these also have the switchback daytime running lights on this car. I went ahead and wired up that resistor so you don't get the hyper flash. So I have these that light up just white, and then when you go to hit the turn signal, they actually light up amber. So those are kind of the updates in a car. The biggest thing being the new tires and the rims. And also what I just showed you guys, like the Kong performance lid and the Kong snout that's opened up to 108, which I will open up to 112 because I have a K-Tech 112 throttle body here. That is no joke. So gonna match that all up. Want to make sure I have 112 going all the way in. I want to feed this thing as much air as possible because I'm going to port the hell out of this blower. I'm going to do a Synergy spec porting on this, and it's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of noise being made, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be dreading this process once I'm in the middle of it. So that is the last step. Actually, the last step will be the fuel system, but the second last step is porting out the supercharger and the snout to match up with each other. So I'm gonna get ready now and start fitting up this heat exchanger and give you guys some highlights of the process along the way. Alright guys, so I am finally done with the Edelbrock heat exchanger. I mounted it inside the shroud, and it was somewhat of a time-consuming process because I wanted to get it just right, and I wanted to get the spacing just right to make sure I do not touch the AC condenser. Now, there's another video out there on YouTube by NorCal Daily Driven or something, I believe, and he's got a red ZR1, and he mounts the heat exchanger about a ½ inch further up on the shroud. So you're looking at it backwards right now. This is the top, that's the bottom. So he mounts it on in between these two kind of holes. So the smaller hole and the big slot there, hole there, window. So he makes a hole right between those two, and that's where he mounts the bottom mount. Now, if you do that, you run the possibility of really touching the AC condenser with like the top end of it here, like this part right here especially. So the same thing on this side. It's going to touch right there. It's going to rub into your fins and probably cause damage and possibly make it leak. Because I've already dry fitted this. There is literally 1/8 of an inch or less in between the AC condenser, like the fins, and this like weld right here. Same thing for the other side. So I'm glad I pushed the whole heat exchanger down about 3/4 of an inch. As you can see here, it kind of mounts on the inside edge of this hole. I made just this little bracket here, washer, to capture the shroud. And I mounted it with all 6 bolts. So I was able to get 2 on each side and then 2 on the top, as you can see there. So I also rubber mounted it with some like 5/8 heater hose. As you can see there, it's I just cut about a 3/4 inch length and use that as a spacer in a rubber mount for the heat exchanger. I made my ports, my cutouts for the actual 3/4 barb. I will still go ahead probably and weld on an AN12 fitting. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do, but I wanted to get everything kind of put together so I can kind of decide what my final routing and my final verdict is for this. I would prefer to have AN12 on everything. So if that happens, I'll go ahead and TIG weld the AN fittings onto the ends. As you can see there, this is what the other side looks like. Same deal. I used the stock 6mm bolts from my stock lid to make the hardware for this. I had to shorten the screws a little bit, about a 1/4 inch for all 6. And then on the end here, let's spin it around. I shortened these screws. This is for your oil cooler that gets mounted to the bottom. Okay, so I shortened them to about a 1/2 inch long. And this is for the oil cooler. It goes right in the bottom. I will show you the oil cooler in the car, what I did. So this is a great fit. As you can see in there, really tight up against the shroud. Okay, you got about a 1/4 inch of space at the top of an air gap, so you're good there. I did actually go ahead and heat up the plastic with a heat gun, and kind of right here, and the same thing on the other side right here, I heated it up till the plastic was soft, and then I went ahead and pushed on the heat exchanger to like kind of cinch it down into the plastic, and it kind of created a bulge right there. It's very subtle, but it does help with clearance, not hitting the AC condenser. So that little bit of a 1/8 of an inch there really helps out. I was trying to gain as much as possible by doing that. So putting a little bit of a bulge in there, and I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I also, on that mating surface there where it touches the plastic, this weld, I kind of hit it with a file to take off all the sharp corners and the high spots on it, just to make it fit better up against the plastic. So I didn't file it too much, just a little bit, just kind of rounded it over, made it a little bit smoother. That way it would fit better up against the plastic. But I would highly recommend doing that. Use a heat gun and kind of distort the plastic and push on the heat exchanger to push it through the plastic a little bit to give you a little more clearance in between. So really happy with the way this came out. Everything is solid. It's mounted in 6 spots, and it does not move. And I've already dry fitted this on the car, and it fits really well. I'm really happy with the way it came out. It does mount the oil cooler a little bit lower than NorCal Daily Driven video. But I believe this is going to be the better bet, because I want to make sure I have clearance, especially at the top here with the AC condenser. So everything still works. I'll show you the car. This is the mesh grate that I made. Is a stainless steel mesh that goes in the bottom of that, like there's a port in the bottom there, underneath the bumper where that black plastic tar paper stuff usually goes. I made this a while ago just to improve airflow and to get more air into the bottom of the vehicle, into the radiator and stuff. So this I'm going to have to modify because the oil cooler is in the way now. So I'm gonna have to bend this up around more like a kind of a curved shape and mount it in the same fashion. So that goes basically underneath the oil cooler just to protect it. So let's take a look at what I did here. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is trim off the sides about 3/8 of an inch. So these aluminum brackets, you have to trim them so they fit inside the white body panel here, the bottom of the bumper. See how this fits right inside? Same thing on this side. So you have to make sure that it clears that. So trim off the edge. And then this hole here, you want to make it a slot. That way it gives you enough room to bolt up and use the standard factory bracket here mounted to the oil cooler to mount up to the Edelbrock heat exchanger. So that bolts on good. I had to also clearance the plastic down here where the hoses kind of touch and come in contact with. So I cut it all the way down to the aluminum radiator support, and that provides enough clearance for the hoses to drop down another 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and not be a problem. So that stainless steel mesh will go underneath this oil cooler and protect it from just random debris. Pretty much I'm ready to go to the next step, which is just basically install it, and then I can kind of plan out my plumbing for the intercooler system. So that's it in a nutshell, guys. It took me about 3-4 hours of playing with it to really kind of hone in and dial in the exact way it needs to mount. I made these aluminum kind of washers here just to give it some extra support down low on the bottom, and everything else kind of bolts up just nice, as you can see there. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments, please place them right down below. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please go ahead and do so. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.